D&D players, what's your best D&D story? This is a story about one of the characters from our first ever tabletop games. It's been over 15 years, so some of the details are very fuzzy, but I'll do my best to include everything I can. P.S. I had no idea it would end up being so long. Apologies, but let's continue. It was a homebrew system that was meant to add realism and real danger to the game. Everything was resolved with a 2d6 roll, to reflect average performance, just 3 stats, strength, agility, and willpower, genetic maximums for stat progression, and 4 horsepower for the entire game. We were also playing characters who were essentially mutants like in X-Men. All the powers were meant to reflect some natural part of the race you were playing and had no defined limitations, i.e. they could evolve over time into something else provided there was some sort of logical reason for the change. The only exception to this rule was for humans, who could manifest truly unique powers and had a willpower gene max potential of 11 while all other races were capped at 10. Our characters were as follows: me, a nuke, basically a 3-foot-tall raccoon/squirrel, named Sarah who had enhanced senses, Cyrus Harrington, an archer/agility adept, Lily, a human healer, Draws the Drasil, basically a giant sentient lizard who could use his forelimbs to throw spears from his back, who possessed enhanced strength and speed, and the focus of the story, Jimmy Ice. No one knew what Jimmy's power was, all we knew in the beginning was that he was very smart, very squishy, and could tinker with and invent items. He would eventually upgrade our small cart with shocks and a sturdy axle so Draws could drag the party across the country in record time. Not that Draws would complain since you were only allowed to level up stats and skills that you used successfully. In those early days, Jimmy didn't do anything really of note, aside from upgrading the cart. Once, he jumped out of said cart and critically hit a giant owl that was gunning for my character, but he wasn't able to detect danger like my character, snipe enemies like Cyrus, tank enemies like Draws, or heal the party like Lily. He would struggle to find ways to be useful by sort of being the party's negotiator, but that wasn't his strong suit in the beginning and would take years to build up that skill. Then, one day, I got to overhear a one-on-one session between the GM and Jimmy's player. The party had become separated to accomplish various goals simultaneously, and Squishy Jimmy was on his own heading towards dangerous territory. In his room at an inn, Jimmy was trying to manipulate slivers of space. That was his power. He could create solid pieces out of the space-time continuum, but they were very dangerous. Essentially Vorpal-like molecular planes of space that could manifest while Jimmy concentrated on them. He could create them, but not move them, and they were not safe at all to touch. It was during one of these experiments that Jimmy critically failed his manipulation roll. We had exploding criticals in both directions, and acquired a new power, the ability to rip a hole in space that we later named Disruption. Squishy Jimmy began practicing this new power constantly, putting aside all his study into manipulation. While Sarah plotted and schemed to become the leader of his peaceful people and the rest of the party went off to find allies against the Beg, Jimmy popped temporary holes in space that would seal naturally and shred anything around the disruption. Our DM decided to add a role-playing cost to this new ability, a dark side element to this incredible power. The more Jimmy used disruption, the colder and more sociopathic he would become. So when he had reached his destination, a logging camp overrun with mercenaries, Jimmy felt nothing while he demanded to become the leader of the camp and popped a hole inside the head of a hulking beast of a man covered in thick slabs of metal. No one could tell how Jimmy was able to do something like that to such a legend. One minute the tank was stomping towards Jimmy, the next he collapses on the ground dead. All the mercenaries were terrified of this skinny, pale man who had entered their operation. Thus Jimmy the Squishy became Jimmy Ice. Jimmy's player didn't abandon his spatial manipulation power, and refined his control during 3 months in-game while we were trapped in a bunker, after the fortress we were defending succumbed to a siege of the undead, though not traditional undead, more on that later. After hundreds of hours of practice, Jimmy Ice was now able to create multiple slivers in once, create barriers/shields that were impenetrable, and craft magic carpets of space that he could move through the air. Presumed dead, we emerged from our hiding spot to once again challenge the big Jerry Fife. Our antics were many and varied after that, attacking strongholds, gathering information about Jerry Fife, but my personal favorite moment was when we tried picking up chicks in the wheat fields by impressing them with our magic carpet. We got sidetracked for about half an hour while our DM facepalmed. We slowly began to realize that Jerry Fife had a unique power in his own right, the ability to draw life out of people. Over the years, he had refined this ability to selectively destroy parts of people's brains to make them unquestioning loyal servants. His undead armies were actually hordes of commoners that had virtually all of their brains atrophied except those parts necessary to ensure loyalty and obedience. More gifted members of the population were allowed to keep larger parts of their brains intact so they could think creatively for Jerry Fife's benefit. This even happened to my character at one point, but the party was able to rescue me, and Lily, the last healer in the land, had grown in power to such a degree that she could repair brain damage. With the party united, and all of the humans practically under Jerry Fife's control, we needed to think outside the box to defeat this Lich King. Drazzle tribes, out on the frontier, hadn't been touched yet by his necromancy, so we headed out to rally the various tribes of the lizard people for a massive, multi-pronged invasion of the human lands. After much negotiation and persuasion, the tribes were united and ready for a full-scale assault. While the bulk of the army attacked from the north, our party, with a large, elite strike force of Drazzle with various abilities, would sail through the air on an enormous wood circle, created by my character, Sare, who had evolved the ability to grow and manipulate plants, propped up by one of Jimmy Ice's magic carpets. Our plan was to sail down the river, behind enemy lines, and burrow our way underneath Jerry Fife's fortress where he would no doubt be hiding. Everything went according to plan until we tried getting inside the fortress. Poisonous roots weaved a protective basket underneath the foundation. While my character was able to slowly make a path for our party, the necrotic energies of Jerry Fife were enervating the mightiest Drazzle of our strike force. Jimmy Ice created a barrier to limit the effects, and Lily did what she could to cure as many Drazzle as she could, but the debilitating strength of the Lich was simply too much. Our allies started to drop as we finally broke through the foundation, only to be confronted by a horde of bodyguards with Jerry Fife safely tucked away inside a concrete block suspended in the air by huge iron chains. There was no way to reach him and contend with all the firepower pointed our way. To make things worse, Jerry Fife's necrotic power became even harder to deal with now that there wasn't a rock wall separating us from his aura. We were trapped and doomed. That's when Jimmy Ice changed the game. Over the course of our adventures his disruption power had grown stronger, allowing the player to roll larger damage dice when he used his ability. By this time he could use a d20 for damage, in a game where everyone had 4 horsepower mind you, but the DM warned him that rolling too much damage could have dire consequences. We had no options left, so Jimmy Ice let loose and popped a hole in space inside the mini bunker Jerry Fife had hunkered within. Jimmy's player rolls 15 damage on a random point inside the bunker and creates a permanent, small black hole right next to the beg. Jerry Fife was able to sacrifice some of his underlings, however, and escape into the countryside. Before chase could be given, we needed to seal up the black hole that would destroy the planet if we didn't act now. It took a couple of attempts, but Jimmy Ice was able to undo the damage to spacetime he had inflicted, and the party was able to fly after the fleeing Jerry Fife. Thanks to my character's enhanced senses, we were able to pick out the real Jerry Fife amidst a host of identical bodyguards running around him, and Cyrus Harrington was able to fell the Lich King with a 300 meters headshot. With the campaign over, and the story wrapping up, Jimmy Ice ended up attracting the attention of extra-dimensional beings thanks to creating a black hole and was forced to join their society. He ended up becoming a sentient point in space that could whip around the galaxy. Been a huge fan of D&D and shared stories for some time now and thought I'd give back a little. My friends and I were running a 5th edition D&D campaign. A bunch of insurgents, us, were trying to overthrow the tyrannical Sun Elf Empire. Along the way, we got an opportunity to assassinate a loyal general in the Wood Elf province who was completely on board with the Sun Elf world order. Luckily he was the father of a member of our party and eager to spend some time investigating with his lost son. We dragged him and his attendants to a lone, jagged hill in the Blighted Zone, a region that would literally kill any elf who entered the area, but thanks to some scrolls provided by the Sun Elves, they could survive for a limited amount of time, where we had laid a trap for the general. A brutal battle ensued, and we were all reduced to nearly half HP before all was said and done. That was the end of our gaming session. Beginning of next session, a purple worm lunges out of the cliffs of the hill we had been fighting on and attacks the party. With all respect, the DM apologized before the game that there might be a TPK this session, but to throw a purple worm at half-dead 5 Latvian Lottie characters was a bit ridiculous. Anyway, the first round sees our druid swallowed whole and unconscious. Our bard, Jennifer, somehow manages to cut a hole in the side of the worm so she can pull out the dying druid the next round. My fighter, Khadim, feeling entirely useless being too far away to use his swords, doesn't know what quite to do to help his friends. Thankfully, I remembered a scene from an old movie I saw once called Tremors. I told the DM that I wanted to provoke the purple worm into charging me and hold my action to run. Perhaps because he felt guilty for sending an obviously up creature after us when we were so wounded, he allowed me to use my bonus action to try and provoke the worm. I threw my dagger at the beast, hurled expletives at it, and the DM told me to roll an intimidation check to get its attention. Natural 20. On the worm's turn, it hurls itself down the hill, Jennifer barely able to pull our druid out of its skullet beforehand, and Khadim turns to run for the cliff just behind him. With the creature on his heels, Khadim jumped off the cliff to a certain death freefall. The worm tries to bite him mid-decent with disadvantage and barely misses. My turn rolls around. We haven't hit the bottom yet and I use my bonus action to drink a potion of regeneration that will allow me to recover 1 horsepower each round for 10 minutes. We both come crashing into the ground, dealing a metric ton of damage to the both of us. Thankfully, the damage inflicted wasn't enough to kill me outright, so my plan had worked. The purple worm was now heavily wounded, and between my attacks and our assassin's sneak attack damage, I was engaged with the beast after all. We were able to kill the creature while Jennifer got our druid back up and running. Hope y'all enjoyed the story. I've got a few more nice ones from over the years I intend to share, but in no particular order. With love from Texas, Poppy Milo. This story comes from the same campaign where Khadim fought the purple worm, another story I posted here. This is about our party member Jennifer Lee Free, a College of Valor bard who was committed to getting stories told about her heroic deeds. Our adventures had led us to the dwarven city of Mordic, a massive sphere of a city protected by a magical stone barrier which kept the monsters of the Underdark at bay. After we get settled in, our characters hear rumors of a wood elf who has been cultivating/selling this weed-like plant which was dulling the minds of the dwarfs, and making them susceptible to influence by our warlock's patron, a powerful galaxy-like creature conquering the astral plane. We decided to ask around the mining taverns and get more information about this elf and the plant he was selling, since we had learned that these dwarfs were more Puritan and wanted to see the plant's consumption ceased. Our party easily finds the tavern we were looking for, and while we knew they weren't huge fans of elves, we didn't know that the miners were sexist. They refused to talk to anyone but my character. Jennifer was not having it. She was the face of our party and had taken many social skills, including expertise in a few. She kept interjecting and trying to guide the conversation, until the head dwarf we were talking to said something to the effect of, "Be quiet, woman." Jennifer immediately barked out a challenge to a boxing match. Not impressed, this arrogant dwarf just laughs at her proposal, until she punches him square in the face. Now, Jennifer is Dex and CHR focused with a strength of 7. This punch does minimum damage, but is enough to embarrass this dwarf, who promptly accepts the challenge, determined to put this uppity woman in her place. The first 2 rounds of combat showed why he's so confident. The DM gave him an impressive strength score and the tavern brawler featuring Jennifer couldn't compete and was on track to go unconscious long before she could whittle him down to half strength. So, Jennifer pulls off an awesome sleight of hand check to drink a potion of giant strength without the crowd noticing. Her next punch sends this guy reeling into the crowd. Jennifer ends up beating this guy mercilessly until he finally gives up. No one looked down on her again or excluded her from conversations after that display. In one of our more epic campaigns, my friends and I used a brutal homebrew system to try and recreate a D&D type setting. Our party consisted of 3 characters, Felmore the Fickle/Magnificent. My friend and I still disagree on which title was more accurate, a gnome arcanist, Benjamin Blackfoot, a halfling warrior who was more like a warrior ninja. His people had a secret military force that no one knew about, and my character Gunter Stellenhouse, a dwarf fighter/cleric mage. As with all magical powers in this homebrew system, specific spells fell under a broader power that was vague in limits and was meant to serve more as a theme for your various powers. If you wanted a new spell, you had to justify its existence within the scope of your power. As a dwarf, Gunter started with a level in earth magic and I chose 3 powers initially: Earth Sight, Move Earth, and Healing. I argued with the DM that you could mend broken bones and heal open wounds by manipulation the earth elements that exist with the body. We only had 3 characters and no dedicated healer, so the DM allowed the spell. Eventually, Stellenhouse would evolve new powers such as Detecting Lies, Thanks, Tough, Enhanced Strength, Stone Skin, etc., all the classics. Now, because this was an untested homebrew system, my powers ended up derailing our DM's plans on numerous occasions just through creative uses of my powers. In one of our first dungeons, Gunter used Earthsight to scout ahead and identify all the twists and turns that lay before us and easily locate a sunken hallway leading to the major plot point within said dungeon. He had intended for us to thoroughly explore this complex filled with large spiders and traps, but we cut a beeline right to the most interesting part, literally making a doorway through a wall to reach it. This hidden hallway led to a trapped room filled with drow who had been encased within by my people years ago utilizing cursed earth magics. Having survived through cannibalism and lichen growth to create air, their leader had prophesied that one day a dwarf would come to set them free and end the war between our peoples. On another occasion, we were trying to get the incapacitated demigod Urtimid back to his patron city of Mordic when we were ambushed by trolls and goblins. The lead troll was a hulking monstrosity with poisoned fangs and claws. Turns out he was the one who had poisoned Urtimid, so getting hit by him would spell certain death for any of us. I tried to use my move Earth Power to create a massive teardrop-shaped rock collapse on the troll's head. Thanks to an exploding critical, a process that might have taken too long to pull off happened very quickly and the dwarfs of Mordic hailed Gunter as a local hero. But my favorite instance happened when Gunter got word from some dwarf refugees that their township was being beset by the undead. Not wanting to see any more of his dwindling people die off, Gunter rallied an expedition force of brave soldiers and headed off to save the township. This was supposed to be a quick solo side mission since the other party members were busy doing other things with their downtime. Our band of 13 dwarfs, including Gunter, eventually learned from a ranger near the town that a necromancer had set up shop on a cliffside overlooking the forest near the dwarf town. Doing all we could to avoid the skeletons that now inhabited the forest, our band, with the help of the ranger, snaked around the backside of the tower to launch a surprise attack. The DM had put a ton of work detailing this tower, traps and creatures and puzzles on every level. The whole thing was made of bones harvested from the necromancer's victims. Gunter, however, had other ideas. Previously, it had been established in the racial lore of the dwarfs that every member of the race possessed some talent with earth magic, and they would frequently take part in mass rituals that bound them together and allowed them to combine their power. Gunter gathered his band in half-circle outside the tower and, with their assistance, just angled the foundation off the cliffside. All that hard work and planning undone with creativity. The DM got his revenge, though. Somehow, the necromancer was able to jump out of the top floor and ninja roll to safety. Damn near killed everyone in my entourage. By the end of it, only 3 of us made it back to Mordic. Totally worth it to shove a tower off a cliff. One of the survivors, Bomber, I know, creative as hell, ended up following me throughout the rest of the campaign. Eventually, he went insane by looking at a cursed mirror. Hello there. If you have a story and want it to be shared, write it in the comments section. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, press like and subscribe for more awesome stories.